as many of our viewers saw, that video of you being briefly detained when you were trying to get a question in to the Homeland Security Secretary. Her office later said you spoke for nearly 15 minutes afterwards. Did you get the answer to the question you were trying to ask? And what was it?
Yeah, sadly, no. And so a little bit of context here. The reason I the reason I was at the press conference, I mean, I was at a scheduled briefing with representatives of Northern Command just a couple doors down the hall in the same federal building when I learned of the press conference. My briefing delayed because the folks I was supposed to meet with were at that press conference. So I asked if we could listen in. I was escorted over, and that's what I was doing. Why? Because for months and months, whether it's in committee, the secretary herself testifying and not providing substantive answers to questions, other representatives of the department, formal letters and inquiries that we've submitted, doing my job as a senator to get information as part of our oversight and accountability responsibility. Mm-hmm. So to be able to ask a question of the secretary directly, when they offered the meeting after the incident, I took it, but sadly, no, nothing substantive, nothing informative.
She couldn't answer the question, or?
Either couldn't or wouldn't. And frankly, that says a lot, right? In terms
what
of
was the
type of, well, among other things, their justification for the federalization of the National Guard, not only not necessary, but counterproductive, as we've seen this last week in Los Angeles, and also just truth. You know, for all the talk about the focus and targeting of violent criminals, if that's all the Trump administration was doing, there would be no debate. There is no disagreement on that. But as you're hearing more and more stories of undocumented long-term residents of the United States who are otherwise law-abiding, working hard, paying taxes, raising families, and frankly, working in jobs that under the first Trump administration, when the COVID pandemic hit, were deemed essential. Right? Workers in restaurants, in agricultural fields, in healthcare, construction, et cetera. That's who's being targeted now, and that's why there's so much fear and terror in communities, not just in Los Angeles, but throughout the country.
I did note it was interesting to see in the House, the Republican Hispanic Conference put forth a letter asking for a breakdown of how many criminals were among those actually deported.
And that was one of the key questions I had for the secretary. Of course, she had no data, had no answer, promised to follow up. I hope. Yeah. We'll see. And I also want to be clear about this, because when I had the audacity to try to ask a question as a senator of a cabinet secretary. That's what happened. And you saw the response, everybody's seen the video. It wasn't about me, right? If that's how this administration responds to a senator with a question, don't just imagine what they're capable of, but what they are doing when the cameras are not there to people without a title like United States Senator, that cruel, disrespectful treatment of so many people who deserve much better. For a cabinet secretary during a press conference to not be able or be willing to de-escalate a situation when I was trying to ask a question, that's just indicative of the tone.
You wanted her to say, wait a second, I know who he is, calm down, let him go? Is that what you're saying?
The vast majority of people in that room knew who I was. Escorted into that room by an FBI agent and a National Guards member. It's the Los Angeles Press Corps. It said United States Senate on the chest of my polo.